Hi, everyone, and welcome to another Talking Insomnia episode. Today, I am honored to be joined by someone that I had the chance to work with through the Sleep Coach School. And so, Mike, I want to welcome you. Thanks so much for being here today.
My pleasure. Hello.
Hi. So, I'd love to just dive right in and ask you some questions about your insomnia story. And so, first off, how did things start for you?
Um, for me, it was sort of a continuation of a thing that had been with me for a long time. About 7 years ago, I started having uh, just really disturbing sensations and stuff that developed into anxiety disorder or panic disorder, however you want to call it.
Sure.
Went through a stint of that, mostly recovered with cognitive behavioral therapy. And then some years went by. I went through some pretty difficult personal and work times. And then suddenly I had profound stomach issues. My stomach was constantly on fire. I went through all the gastro stuff, saw experts. Everything was fine on paper. And then I found a bunch of resources there, which I think we kind of shared a bit in common,
Yeah.
around like the mind-body connection to how stress shows up in different symptoms. I used a couple of resources, which maybe we'll talk about later.
Sure.
And again, kind of, I would say recovered, but um, that was a bit of a bloody one. I came out of that one constantly. I mean, as an example, I wasn't like walking around every day thinking, are things going to get worse? Because a lot of days were pretty bad. It wasn't like I was out of the woods. I had a lot of tension, a lot of panic attacks, just things that I sort of learned to live with.
Mhm.
And um, I remember I was starting a new job, and it was in a kind of senior role, and I was talking to the folks who were hiring me, and they asked, what are you thinking about starting? And I said, I'm looking forward to it, but I just want to warn you, like, this has happened to me before. It'll probably happen again. And I was kind of like giving them the heads up, like, damage goods here, so buy at your own risk. And that was kind of present in my thinking. Like I was a bit fragile.
Sure.
So a couple of years after that, so this is 7 years into it. This would have been April of 2022. Um, Life-wise, everything was going quite well. I liked my job. Um, I was doing a lot of things. I was volunteering for things. I was pursuing my faith practice a lot. I was doing a lot of stuff,
Yeah.
and felt pretty good. But there was one day where I came home from in April from like an Easter celebration with my folks, and I heard like blood rushing through my ears.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I've had so many different nervous system related things that I was like, oh, a new one. Um, so I kind of shrugged it off, but it was disturbing me. And I remember looking it up. It was called pulsatile tinnitus. I kept listening to it.
Yeah.
And it was kind of driving me bonkers. And I don't remember exactly how it happened. I remember going to visit a friend and biking to see them, and I almost passed out. And I was like, what is
Mhm.
happening? This is not normal. Like, I've never
Yeah.
felt like actual really difficult physical effects from what I experienced. And one day I got my blood pressure checked, and it was like high-ish. It was like 140 or something.
Okay.
And that's a number that's like 20 or 30 points higher than I'd ever seen it personally. Um, it had been higher. I just never knew because I didn't care. And
Right.
I got spooked. I left it for a month. And then I checked it again. I can't remember why. And it was like 160. And I remember 160 over 90 or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
And something I think inside me lost it. I was really stressed. I went to uh, the walk-in clinic. They said they should put me on medication, and um, but like wait a month. And I went to bed the night after I went to see that walk-in doctor. And I've had a lot of stuff happen at night. I've had panic attacks and stuff. Have a I had a way of working with it.
Yeah.
But that night I just had extreme, like, crushing pressure in my head and in my chest. And I'd had it before, but not like this. It was like dialed up to 12, and it lasted for like 3 hours. And so I remember sitting there while it was happening in like this calm place, thinking like, my body really doesn't like what's going on, but I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And next day I was tired, kind of a mess. And then the next night I went to bed. I'd never had trouble sleeping really ever. And I was very sleepy, but every time I started to fall asleep, I would jerk awake.
Mm.
And that went on for like 4 hours. And I've had the thing prior to this where as you're falling asleep, like it feels like you got thrown out of a plane and you like,
Ugh,
yeah.
yeah,
I
it's
mean,
the
I actually
worst.
kind of like it. It's funny. Um, but this was different. It was like very gentle, but every time I started to drift to sleep, it would jerk me awake and jerk me awake.
Yeah,
And it did it for
yeah,
like 3 4 hours. And because I've been through so many weird things with my body, I didn't immediately flip out. I was just like, oh, it's a new thing. Um, so I was trying to calm it down and stuff, but something in my mind was like, this is finally the thing I'm not okay with. I've been through like dozens of these, but for me, like at that time, getting through the day was already hard, and I think I wasn't admitting to myself how hard it was.
yeah,
So this was, I think, a point at which I just kind of ran out of steam. I was Some part of me was freaking out. It was like looping, and I
of
looked it
course.
up, and I found stories of people who were like this for years, and um, this kind of stuff. And the next night, the whole night it went on. I didn't sleep at all.
Mm.
Next day, I freaked out a bit. Next night, it happened again, and from here, it just kind of escalated. I took time off work. They gave me a couple weeks, and I don't remember, like maybe a week into it, it had been the third or fourth night in a row, or from my perspective, I hadn't slept at all, and I just started having really whirling thoughts about ending my life, basically,
Yeah,
and I ended up in the ER, and that's when they threw a whole bunch of drugs at me, and that's how it started. I mean, we can kind of go on from there, but yeah, that's what led up to it. So it wasn't really out of nowhere. Um, but the symptom itself was like really out of nowhere. It, it was not what I would have expected my body could do.
yeah, no, definitely. And I think that's so common is even if we've experienced other strange symptoms in our bodies, sometimes we get a new one and we're like, that's it. That one's not okay. There's something about that one that is not okay. And for me, I remember it was the first time I started having twitches and jerks, even though I already had insomnia. The twitches and jerks for me were just, that was it. It was crossing a line somehow. And it created a whole other level for me that I almost stepped into a different part of my insomnia because of this particular symptom. So it makes complete sense that that is sort of how things really sparked and then sort of translated into having a lot of trouble sleeping. Because of course the jerks are really good at preventing sleep, really good at coming in and doing that. Definitely.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I think I'm not a big why person anymore. I think that was a big trouble point for me. But I think what was sort of the tipping point for me was that I was enduring a lot of my life without realizing it. Things were hard. And one thing I could rely on is that I could go to bed at night and forget about it for a while.
Yeah.
Um, and it's not like I had the best. I slept well, but many nights, like 1 or 2 nights a week, I'd get woken up by a panic attack. Um, I'd get through it. Honestly, they didn't bother me. I was just used to it. And so I might be awake for 2 or 3 hours. It never bothered me. I never thought like, oh, maybe I'm not getting enough sleep.
Yeah.
It was just when it went from that to zero that
Yeah.
it was a bit of like, okay, I don't know if I can handle this. Like I've handled a lot, but this is maybe it. Um, yeah, and that's when things kind of went off the rails.
And is that when you and I connected through the sleep coach school, or was there sort of a journey before that?
Yeah, so I guess we're looking at um, it's really foggy now, but I think it must have been a couple weeks in April where I started looking around for help, and I knew that I'd been through crazy stuff that doctors couldn't really explain before and
Yeah.
recovered. So it kind of actually, when I first found the sleep coach school, I don't remember how I found it, but I read the books. I forget which the first one was. I think I just read one of
Yeah.
them actually.
Was it Set It and Forget It, which is sort of
Yeah,
Daniel's main first one?
the first
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember getting through it, and I think maybe a lot of people read that book and come out being like, "Oh my gosh." But for me, I was actually in worse spirits after I read it, because
Interesting.
the reason why is that when I read it, I was like, "Oh, this is actually very similar to all the stuff I've done before, and yet I'm still here."
Mm.
So I believed it. Like, I knew it wasn't a question of seeing this thing and thinking, "Will this help me?" I knew the answer was yes, but where I was kind of devastated was like, "But it's also kind of more of the same."
Ah,
Um, and so if it hasn't helped me before, like maybe I've just run out of things that'll help
mm,
me. And at that time, I was really still in the mindset, which I think makes sense when you're in acute distress, of like I need something that will work, not something that will help me.
yeah.
I need something that will take this
Yes.
away. And so there
Yeah.
was this fight in my head about, like, that's not possible. You're gonna have to, live this for who knows how long and accept that. But
Mm.
there was a strong part of me that was like, absolutely not. And so,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, so I think I read the books. I remember I got up one day after it was like the third night in a row of, from my perspective, getting zero sleep, and I read the book from like 4 a.m. until 8 a.m. and I was done. Like that's it. I read the
Yep.
whole thing. And but what I came out of after that happened was I thought to myself, I talked to people who were close to me because they were really worried about me. That in the past I'd been pretty rigid about what I would allow to help me.
Mm.
Um, I would find a thing that I thought was good for me. I would practice it. And I don't know if you recognize this, but I think what I've seen now helping other people go through, I don't know how much I'm helping, but connecting with people who are experiencing things related to anxiety or just stress illness, is that I think some folks go through a really long arc of like, I found the thing that works. And like you can tell because they want to tell everybody, like, this is the one thing. Did you
Yes.
read this one book? This one book really helped me. And I think I was kind of on that train. Maybe it was like 2 or 3 books.
Yeah.
But and when they failed me, I was really like, okay, um, I need to open myself up a bit, and it's gonna be really uncomfortable. And I that was an understatement. So I'd never really tried anything medication wise before,
Mm.
and by fluke, the day after I came out of the ER, they kept me the night. They threw all kinds of meds at me. They gave me I don't remember all the names. They gave me sertraline. They tried to give me trazodone already.
Trazodone. Yeah.
I had terrible experiences with that. I believe it had nothing to do with the drug that was causing
Mm.
me to have terrible experiences with it. And then they threw a bunch of Ativan or Clonazepam. I mean, I don't know. I think it was Clonazepam.
Yeah.
And the guy on staff, I think it was helpful that I didn't expect. Like, I went into the ER knowing that they wouldn't be able to help me. That was
Mm.
helpful, having that mindset.
Yeah.
Because when I went in, they threw a bunch of stuff at me, and the guy was kind of rude, and he's like, "This is your fault," blah blah blah. Threw a bunch of stuff at me, and when I
Ah,
told my partner what had happened, they were very upset. But I was like, "I'm not upset. I'm just glad that I spent the night and they knocked me out, and I got to spend a peaceful day in. They locked me in a room basically,
yeah.
you know, in case
Yeah.
they were worried about self harm. So um, I came out of all that, and I was spending some time at a relative's, and they mentioned that they have it's a long story, but they have a connection to a psychiatrist, and they
Okay.
were willing to see me right away. So I went to go see them. And that was the beginning of another journey that I'll have no idea ever if it was, I think it was helpful, but it was certainly
Mm.
not short-term helpful. Things got much worse before they got better.
Okay.
And there was distinctly a period of time where they asked me to stay on Ativan long term. Ativan? Yeah, I think it was Ativan.
Mhm.
And I remember when I was watching all the sleep coach videos and stuff, people would talk about the medications they're taking. My crazy mind would be like, "Oh, I wonder how much they're taking and for how long." And so I'm going to tell folks, in case you're worrying that, like, oh,
It's so
what, maybe
normal.
his dose was, yeah. But I think when they first got to me, they're like, take a milligram a day of Ativan, half in the morning, half in the evening. And
Yeah.
I started doing that, and the first time I took the Ativan at night on the recommendation of my psychiatrist, I'd already taken it a couple times and it was fine. But that night, I put it in my mouth. I lay back, I closed my eyes, and I swear to God, I saw like a fire column coming out of my body. Like it was a full out,
Oh.
like I was awake, but it was just like the the devil was coming to get me.
Oh.
Like my body was not having it, and it was quite a powerful, like, I don't know, hallucination or whatever. I don't like I opened
Mm.
my eyes, it was gone. It was not like it was there in the room. It was
Yeah.
gone. But yeah, not happy about it. So I went through a really stressful period there where the thoughts returned about self-harm and this kind of stuff, and they got quite intense for a period of a few weeks. There were
Oh.
med changes during this time. Things got yanked around here and there. I don't remember at all. But there was a period of time where I thought I just things were over. This was it. Like my life was destroyed. I wasn't being able to work anymore.
Mm.
I wasn't going to be able to feel anything other than suffering anymore. And I have a faith practice that it's a form of Buddhism, and I'd been practicing it with various forms of intensity for like the last couple of years.
Okay.
And the main practice is where you chant, and it's like meditation except you're chanting. It's a bit more active. And I remember thinking like, I don't know if this can help me, but if ever there was a time where it could help me, maybe now is it. So
Mhm.
on the days where, I would get out of bed and immediately it would be a heavy weight of just my thoughts being completely impossible to contain. Like it was just brutal. I would get up, I'd go to my room where I chant, and I would start chanting at like, I mean, depending between 6 and 7, and I would chant till like 2 p.m. And
Mm.
because that whole time I was chanting literally for my life. Like I did not want to be alive every minute of every second of every day,
Yeah.
every unit of time of every day I wanted it to end. And so I would chant. And what I found is that there were other people in my area who I could connect with virtually who were all chanting for one reason or another. So somebody would be chanting from 7 to 9, I would join them. And
Okay.
then somebody would start at 9 and go to 12, I joined them. And I just felt completely bereft. And
Mhm.
but I think the thing that helped me the most in us working together around this time, because by this time I think we'd had like 1 or 2 sessions,
Okay.
and the early things that were uh, building up to being really helpful were around like how to pragmatically look after myself while this was happening, because that was really hard for me. I thought I had gotten good at it, and I really was not.
But it's also really hard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that helped a lot. And I'd say by the end of the summer, I had kind of gotten to the point where it wasn't agony being myself, Uh, I don't remember how I was sleeping. It was not well. Like it was somewhere between. I stopped paying attention to the clock. That was a really helpful thing early on, where I just go to bed. I think at that time I was going to bed super late too. Like I'd go when I was sleepy, which was never. So it was basically when I got exhausted of being awake, or having my eyes open. Really was what it was. And yeah, so I'd go to bed around somewhere between midnight and 3. I'd usually be out of bed. Sorry, I'd be awake early, and then I think it started getting hard for me to get out of bed because I was too tired or something. Anyways,
Yeah.
um, but it was around August where I was like, if I have to live, I'm gonna give a shot at actually trying to be alive in little ways. So I started working again, which was challenging. I do remember like a couple weeks into starting, I went into a week where I had been sleeping regularly, if short periods of time, like 3 hours here, 4 hours there, kind of thing. And I went into one week where I had a presentation at the end of the week. It was no big deal. It was just like presenting some ideas to coworkers. On the Sunday night, I didn't sleep really hardly at all, and then I fully did not sleep until like Monday night did not, Tuesday night did not, Wednesday night did not. And I remember saying, okay, I'd get up every day and I'd be like, it didn't happen again last night. I wonder if it'll happen again tomorrow night. I remember thinking, like, I've not tested this, you know, in any meaningful way. The first time I went a big stretch of nights without sleeping, I lost it.
Yeah.
But this time I felt terrible, but I was kind of curious to see, like, you know, they tell me eventually I'm going to collapse. Like, I wonder what's going to happen. And it was not nice.
How long can this go?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I think the night before I gave the presentation, or no, it was not. Because I remember going to that presentation thinking, like, I have not slept this week. Like, I really have not. And I remember hearing myself speak and thinking, like, wow, this guy's pretty coherent considering what's going on, you know? And got to the end of it and they're like, hey, that was good. You know, we got a lot out of it. I felt nothing except emptiness, you know, but it was kind of curious. And then it passed and it picked up again.
Okay.
You know, I started sleeping. I think that night I got a full night's sleep for the first time in ages, and then, you know, went back to the previous pattern. But so that was kind of the start. And after that, I think around this time I started seeing you relatively frequently. It was like once every week or two, and I feel like I'm talking nonstop, so I don't know if you want to interject with anything.
No, I think it's great I think everyone's going to really benefit from hearing your story as you tell it. So I'm intentionally not, you know, I don't want to interrupt or anything. I have some questions along the way, but no, I think just having people have the chance to hear your story is great. So please feel free to continue and share.
Yeah, like, I think some of the stuff that helped me around this time was looking back, there were some things I'm happy that I did. When the hypnotic stuff first started, the very first thing I did, my partner was in a really stressful job at the time. And I was having a hard time being alone, but, you know, I wanted to keep my space because it was difficult for them being around, obviously, right? But early on, like, I spent the first week in a different bed because I was like, if I'm like this all night and I'm like, you know, I'm going to keep them awake. And also, I didn't want anybody around. But after the first week, I remember saying to myself, and I talked to my partner about it, was that, like, if this is going to be the rest of my life, like, I don't want this to keep me in another room, you know? So if I have to be awake all night, I might as well, you know, do what we were doing before. And so I did, you know, I just went back, and I think that was good. I've noticed, and I haven't watched the videos in a long time, but I've noticed several folks saying, you know, they went to a different room and that was like their bunker, and, you know, this is where I live now. And that was starting, you know, for me. I think the other thing that helped too is early on, despite the fact knowing that it wasn't going to do anything, I was trying, like, all the things. Like, I tried the teas, and, you know, I won't go through the list.
Yeah, I was going to ask you how much of all of that did you try? Was it kind of before you and I working together, or was it kind of doing?
It was in that first week of all this stuff happening where I knew it wasn't, like, I think this was the thing that helped me. I knew it wasn't going to do anything.
Yeah.
But I wanted to try something. So, like,
we have to.
Yeah, but I tried ashwagandha, which helped me feel calmer. I tried a bunch of teas. I don't remember. I tried melatonin. I took magnesium baths. Yeah, all kinds of stuff. I don't remember.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like I gave myself a time limit. It's just I quickly realized that, like, this is completely detached from what my actual issue is. You know, like, I knew that. So those are some things that went well. But some of the stuff that was new for me was just being useless. And, you know, that's kind of a blunt way to say it, but for a long time, you know, the way I got through the day was, like, I was alone for a lot of it too, right? My partner was working a lot. And on the days where I was working, work often didn't help me that much. You know, I was working from home. It was really difficult to focus. It was difficult to do anything, really. And so I would just kind of look forward to, you know, maybe 7 p.m. that night where maybe we'd watch television together for 2 hours.
Yeah.
And then that was it. That was my day. You know, I'd look forward to that. If I got to that, I was, you know, that's what I look forward to. And it wasn't even like that time was particularly enjoyable either. It's kind of uncomfortable to sit there and watch things. But
Oh, I get it. It's a reprieve, though. I remember the same thing, thinking I just need to get to this point in the evening. Yeah.
yep. And holy heck, did I watch a lot of shows. I've never really watched TV much, but there's no more Netflix for me anymore. I reached the end. It's over. More or less.
Impossible, Mike,
Yeah.
impossible.
And Prime, there's one other one too. I can't remember. But there are other things that help too. Like my partner herself has been through some terribly difficult nervous system stuff, and she had brutal insomnia for years. Like,
Mm,
and for her, it was just what she told me as I was going through is she didn't understand why I was suffering so much. Because for her, when it had happened to her, um, she'd had it since childhood, and
okay.
it got to a point where, from what I understand, like there were many nights where she would just basically like close her eyes and feel. She said her whole body felt electrocuted, and it would just jerk her awake over and
Mm,
over again. I'm like, oh, that sounds familiar. I was like, how long did
mm,
you go through this? She's like, I don't know, like a decade or two. And I was like, oh my god, you kill me now, you know. But for her, her life went on. Like it, she wasn't worried about health effects. She wasn't worried because
yeah,
what everybody was telling her is like, hey, you'll just be tired. Like that was
yeah,
how they saw it. And she's a bit older than me, but not much. She's just from a different place.
yeah,
And so she didn't think about it. And until it got really like other things got really bad and she went through everything, right? So
mm,
she understood what was happening, but she hadn't experienced as much the um the panic. For her, it was more
yeah,
numbing, I think. Like she would shut down.
yeah.
Whereas for me, everything was heightened. Yeah.
It makes sense. It actually makes me think of, Coach Beth, a friend of mine who her insomnia lasted for about 40 years, started in early childhood. And I remember her talking about it in a similar way, almost like it normalizes sometimes when it starts so young, and it's a little bit of a different experience, still very challenging, of course, but not necessarily the same way as a person might react when they first experience something like that in adulthood. So I think that has an impact, like if we start to experience something really young and it normalizes a little bit. Maybe that's the
Well,
wrong way to say it, but that's sort of
you
what I
become
heard
accustomed
from
to
her.
it. Yeah. And I think,
Yeah.
but like not everyone will. For me, I don't think I would have. My aunt,
Yeah.
she's 80 now, and we're close friends. And I didn't know this until I started talking to a few specific people what was going on, and she's experienced really difficult sleeplessness since she was like 15. She's 80. And
Right.
now, like she'll say now, like there's many times where she'll go like 2 or 3 nights without sleeping from her perspective. I know my mom has stayed over there a few times. She's like, I hear your aunt snoring, so I don't know that she's not sleeping. But you know,
Classic.
it's stuff like this, yeah. But it's
Yeah.
clear that she doesn't sleep much, and she said it got a lot worse around a time where I know she was going through some stress. I don't know that she's connected the two. But for her, it's easy to look at somebody like that and say, I wish I could help them, but her life's great. Like she's
Yeah.
happy all the time. It never affects her emotions. Like and maybe she has what
Mhm.
do you call like maladaptive ways of hanging, but she's 80. Come on. She's lived a good
Yeah.
life. She has a loving
She's
family. She's
she's
always in
doing
a good
great.
mood. Yeah, she's doing fine.
She's doing great.
I don't need to help anybody in that situation.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
Yeah.
after the first 2 or 3 months of it being like really white knuckle, I got to August, I went back to work. I think part of me, I didn't feel it, but part of me felt uplifted by the fact that I had a routine. I was doing things. I remember the first time I was doing something at work where I saw other people are doing stuff. I'm like, this is insane. And I asked them a few questions. And I'm like, that's a really good idea. And I remember thinking, like, it doesn't matter how bad this gets, it still hasn't taken me away. Like, there's things that I'm
Yeah.
seeing differently that have helped me in my career before. And it wasn't that I was all about career. It's just that was all I was doing. So it was where I was seeing it.
Sure.
And so I got into September and I remember thinking, okay, at that point, I've been yanked around a bunch. I started SSRIs. I started on, and again, I'll say dosages because I know people worry about these things. I think
Yeah.
I got uh, 5 milligrams initially of. I can't say I can never say the actual name of it, but in Canada it's called Cipralex. In the US, I think it's called Lexapro. It's as good as Calopram or something. I can't say it out loud. So they started me on 5. They really quickly went up to 25. And I think at the time when I was still like the kind of person who Googled things, I think like 20 milligrams is supposed to be like the realistic ceiling, but like
Okay.
there's people on 60 and 70, those kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that experience was interesting because I remember walking around feeling dead and numb inside, but then there was a part of me that was warm and fuzzy. So it's not like it made me happier. It's like all of me was shut down, but there was part of me that's like, "Wee!" And it was really bizarre to watch, but it helped me. It propped me up a little bit.
Sure.
And what I feel for me happens is that when the dosage increases, I feel like a specific set of effects that are sort of like uplifting, and then
Yeah.
once it kicks in, it's a different set of effects that kick in that
Okay.
are more like I'd always heard them called antidepressants, and I think people are starting to move away from that, probably for good reason. But the way I experience is that I used to have like a pretty wide range of emotions, both low and high, and it kind
Mhm.
of takes the edges off of each. So I never get as ebullient as I used to, but very few things bother me as much as they used to. Like it used to be easy for me to listen to like a song from childhood, get really teary eyed. I'd cry at all the movies, this kind of thing, and
Yeah.
not so much anymore. I don't lose my temper as quickly, that kind of thing.
Mm.
And it's hard for me now at this point to tell, and I don't care much about like whether some of the stuff I've been doing outside of the medication has also rounded that out or not. But none of those effects were there in the early days, just the boost, like the boost.
Yeah.
And
Interesting.
it was quite bizarre. And it was helping me because I'd lost like 40 or 50 pounds in the stressful period.
Mm. Very
And
common. Yeah.
yeah, I couldn't, everything tasted like ashes. And when I started taking the Cipralex, I got hungry. That again felt weird because I didn't want to eat, but I was hungry.
Okay.
So it just kind of helped me like limp along.
Yeah.
So I
Like,
started that. Mhm.
was that part of how you mentioned earlier, there is some of the things in the early days that were really helpful for you, or really more around the pragmatic kind of taking care of yourself parts? Was that part of that? Could you share a little bit about what that was for you?
Yeah, that was more a like there were things that I was doing that I knew would help me feel better. Like I started, sorry, just like things that it may not change how I'm feeling, but I know that there are things that I like to do. And this sounds weird, like being so explicit about what was going on, but like as I was doing things that helped me take care of myself, they didn't feel good,
Yeah.
but they were something. Like I started reading a little bit here and there. And at that time I was really really brain foggy, so I would forget things. Like I put a glass down, I forget it was there. I think I was just super stressed. But I read, whenever I've gone through a life crisis, I always read like giant book for some reason. So I read the Brothers Karamazov, and I got to the end. I can't tell you what happened in that book, but I really enjoyed reading it. And I read the entire Dragon Tattoo series, this kind of thing. So that was nice.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And then, like I said, I started watching television with my partner. I used to not have time for it. I started playing video games, that kind of thing. I go for walks. I call family. I hadn't
Mm.
really been doing as good a job at keeping up with people as I liked, and it was nice to know they were there. And then eased up on having got to the point where I thought I would never be able to do anything again. When I came back into doing things, it didn't feel so urgent to like be the best at them. So,
Mm.
I gave myself a lot of slack there, and my work was really good about that. But so those were things that I think just generally helped me, and I could feel like those were
Yeah.
not controversial. They were helping me. Seeing you was non-controversial.
Mm.
It really helped me. And A, it's because you're great, and also B, I think part of it is because what we were talking about was familiar to me. It was
Yeah.
stuff that was not challenging,
Yeah.
like in my heart. I felt like, yeah, this aligns with who I am. Like this works for me. Yeah, the medication stuff was not that at all. And it's kind of stupid now looking back. Well, not stupid. It's just where I was at. Where for like 7 years, I was going through a lot of stuff. It wouldn't have killed me to try SSRI, but I was
Mm.
like dead set against it, and really fearful,
Yeah.
really narrow-minded views of what was acceptable and what was not. So this was a big challenge. Like the thing when I first started feeling when I started experiencing the insomnia, I had like 1 or 2 days where I had like uncontrollable thoughts of self-harm, and then it faded.
Okay.
But when they started me both on the SSRIs and they increased my Ativan dosage, I think it was, because it switched eventually, I lost it. That's when I saw the fire and all this stuff. And there was a solid 3 or 4 weeks where it was like that. That's when I was chanting and all this stuff. So I know it was the medication, starting that course of medication, that triggered it. And so coming into September, I said to myself, okay, I kind of tried to make a deal where I was always looking ahead to say, when am I going to get off the benzos? When am I going to blah, blah, blah. And I thought to myself, it's been a really rough few months. Can I just get through September day by day and just do what I can to enjoy life just for September? In October, I can freak out. That's fine. But, 1 month more or less on the clonazepam, maybe it'll kill me, maybe it won't, but for crying out loud, like, let's just try it. So that kind of succeeded. I got to like September 20th-ish, and then I freaked out. But for like a couple weeks, I was able to kind of just go day by day and not stress too much about the future. And
did that shift things? Because I remember working with you at that time, that idea of the day by day approach. What was that like?
It took a lot of practice. Like at first
Yeah.
it was not, and it's one of those things where I was surprised that practice helped. It's easy to think about, like, it's hard to do without practice, but I didn't, like, if somebody told me, like, if you practice living a day at a time, you'll get good at it. You wouldn't think of that as a life skill, but it's really helpful.
It sounds like a cliche that we almost are repelled by it when we hear stuff like that.
To me, it appealed because I'd always been sort of the only things that I would think about in the future were things I was scared of. I wasn't really like planning my future. I just worried about it.
Of course.
So, the day by day thing was something that I like had appeal, like it always intrinsically appealed to me, but I just wasn't good at it. And so I think when I started with you, it was like, just try to go minute by minute, hour by hour. And there were a lot of times where I was going like literally minute by minute in the first couple of months, for sure. And they came back. It's not like once I got to day by day, it stayed a day by day. No, there were a lot of times. So that was a big help. Around this time, I'm losing track of when I tried things, but I started trying some other nervous system practices. And surprisingly, like, if I could distill it down, the thing that helps me a lot, that just seems to be helping a lot of other people, is like lying on a hard surface. It sounds stupid, but we can go into that a bit later.
Yeah.
But you taught me some things around orienting. And another thing I learned around this time is that there's multiple reasons why I feel like it's not a great idea to look up health information on the internet.
Oh, yeah.
But a big one is that, here's just something I found kind of upsetting even when I experienced it, was as I was looking for things that might help me, I was looking into some nervous system support things, like practices that are around, people have different, it's hard to talk about them because they're so big and I don't want to go on forever.
No, I get what you mean.
Yeah. And maybe if this goes on YouTube or whatever, I can just leave some footnotes.
Sure.
And a lot of them are resources you're familiar with. But what I was finding is that there's like things really quickly become communities and spaces. And this to me is quite bizarre. Like you'd find like trauma healing communities. And I was just looking for somebody to help. And like for any given practitioner who was out there, there'd be a trail of like Reddit posts or something of like, this person, like I came up with a term which is like regulation shaming. Like they would say like this trauma therapist isn't themselves well regulated, so they're triggering me into, and that may be the case, right?
Could be, yeah.
Where I was getting frustrated is like there's not anybody who's going to help me if they need to be perfect. And so I found a couple of resources where actually I could not stand the person running it, and like they gave me creepy vibes as soon as I got on it, and I thought, I don't need to move in with this person. I'm going to try what they are suggesting. I'll do my best to keep my space from like their podcasts and their whatever, but I'm going to try the material. And what was helpful is because they're interested in accessibility, they'd have videos, but then they'd have transcripts.
Okay.
And so when I felt open to listening to this person and hearing their voice, I would listen. Like it's on that level that they irritate me. Like I cannot.
I get it. I have the same thing with certain people. I get it.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the thing that's really distasteful in this space is that I am now, this is my opinion, it is not like a study or anything, but I
Yeah.
feel like what happens is if you're, I mean, you actually probably understand this way better than I do. If you're in a position where you're like a coach online, for example,
Mm.
it's a lot of work to work one-on-one with people.
Sure.
So if you want to open up your audience to folks who are a big enough audience that you can scale, you're going to get all kinds. And I think what's really hard is that when you're going to get all kinds, maybe a small percentage of them are experiencing acute symptoms.
Yeah.
And so your actual audience ends up being a lot of people who are healthy and they're
Mhm.
looking to optimize or get better. And it's really
Yeah.
frustrating to be spoken to from that perspective when you're really suffering.
Yes.
Because you get messages like, if you do these exercises, your plants will grow better, and like, stuff like this. And I'm like, my plants could die in a fire for all I care right now. I just want to live.
Yeah. Yeah.
So uh, that I found kind of distasteful because it felt to me like
Mm.
the resources that were most accessible are folks who are not doing it to help people. They're doing it because they like it. And there's a difference between that. I'm not judging them.
Mhm.
It's great that they found something that they like. But when you are in a position of suffering, it's
Yes.
hard to learn from people who you are clearly, they don't really feel like they care about you. They care about the mission.
Mhm.
And that's different. So
Yeah.
long course, but
Yeah.
I think a lot of the folks watching this will probably end up looking for their own things. And for me, the thing that I want to kind of bottom line is that it was helpful for me to try things that I found distasteful. Not that I hated or I was powering through it, but I was able to
Mhm.
separate out, like, maybe I don't like where this is coming from,
Mhm.
but I will try it anyways and see. It may not
Sure.
help me. I may not like it, but I'm going to give it a shot. And because I'd gone through being able to try taking clonazepam regularly for months, and I was still at that time thinking that this may destroy my life, right? I
Mm.
wasn't confident yet that I was going to come out of it. I was looking at this being like, well, honestly, what's the worst that can happen?
Yeah. Yeah. In a weird way, it opened you up to other things. Yeah.
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
took it slow. I tried little things here and there, and somewhere around December, coming into Christmas, I started feeling like not much had changed. I was still going day by day. I was getting more comfortable
Yeah.
with that. I still experienced a lot of wacky stuff. Um, but I started to feel more settled about where I was at.
Yeah.
Settled with being unsettled, I guess. And
It's a good way to put it.
yeah, we'll talk about this a bit later too if we get to it.
Mm.
But
Yeah.
just to kind of fast forward, I was August, September, October, November, December, 5 months into this. So I
Mhm.
came into Christmas, and the psychiatrist I was working with was saying, you seem like you're doing better.
Mhm.
They knew at that point that I was averse to being long term on the benzodiazepines. I didn't have a strong opinion about the SSRIs,
Right.
um, and I'd gone through quite an arc with the benzodiazepines. Like at one point, my dose quadrupled. So
Mm.
I think for a lot of people, maybe this isn't a big deal, but they put me on 1 milligram of clonazepam at one point nightly, and
Mhm.
I was like I was going into surgery. Like I would take the thing.
Wow.
I wasn't sleeping. I was like poleaxed. Like I was completely knocked out, and I was actually having trouble breathing a little bit, and I'd be out for like
Mm.
10 hours, and then I had no feelings. I was just like a zombie. And for
Mm.
a week, I was like, oh, I guess I'm trying this now. Like I wasn't panicky. I tried to get out and do stuff. I had no idea what was going on around me. Completely dead to the world,
Mm.
you know. And then
Yeah.
I spoke to them about it, and they're like, "Why didn't you call me sooner?" I was like, "I don't know, I'm trying things." They're like, "You could
How
have
long
called me." Yeah,
how long was that period where you were on
like
that
10 days.
dosage? About 10 days, okay. Well, I'm glad that you connected with them after 10 days.
I remember going to the mall with my partner because I really like old malls, and so like, maybe I'll feel some warmth by going to do this. And I went for a walk in this old mall, and at one point I stopped and I just stood there,
Mm.
and I just stood there for like, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes, and I was like, I feel nothing. I'll just wait for her to come back.
Mm.
Um, I wasn't sad or happy. I was just numb,
Just numb,
So
wow.
anyhow, so I'd gone through that, and I was like, well, you know, uh, some of these other things, trying them is maybe not so bad. So coming into December, I felt like maybe it's time to try to wean off of the the benzodiazepines, but what I wanted to commit to myself was that I was not in a hurry.
Mm.
And so initially when I thought about tapering, I wanted to go very slowly because I was scared.
Mm-hmm.
But when I came into December, I thought, no, I am actually, if somebody was to rip these away from me right now, I would probably find a way. But I would like to go slower because I think it'll be easier. And I'm tired of everything being so damn hard. So I talked to my doctor about it. I don't think they realized how severely I was going to take going slowly. And I kind of got to the point where I don't know how easy it is to con a psychiatrist or not, but I was kind of at the point where like I know what to tell them, I think, so that I'm not being irresponsible. I'm letting them know the most important things about me, but I'm not telling them everything, because if I tell them everything, they're going to yank me around more than I'm comfortable with, and I'm tired of trying to explain this, you know. So that managed okay, and I had like the whole kit where you like, I bought a drug dealer scale. I'm sorry if that's offensive, but like,
You did it right,
you call
Mike.
it.
You did it right.
A food scale, you know.
Food scale,
and
correct.
Then I had like a weekly routine where I'd go and I'd like shave it, and I was going down by like 1/18 because I think I weighed the thing. I was on 0.5 milligrams of clonazepam at this point. I weighed the thing and it was like 0.018 grams or something ridiculous. So I would try to shave off one of those every time or something like this. I can't remember. And but as I went into, I thought I'll do this over the Christmas break because it'll give me some more time. I did that and my body went insane. Like I hadn't reduced the dose yet, but I didn't sleep for Christmas, like for days, like for 3 or 4 days. I was off the rails, and I knew it was happening. Right? I knew my body was not. I had been terrified to be on this stuff, and I was terrified to get off of it.
Of course.
And I think I saw you a lot, like not over the Christmas break, but during this time, I knew that I was looking for extra support, so I got it where I could get it, and so it started slowly, and then I just tried to live my life, and and when I say live my life, I wasn't putting pressure on myself to live a good life. I was just saying like I'm gonna get through each week and see if there's something I can get out of this. And I started a bunch of things. Well, I should say I started a few things and continued a few things that were very helpful to me. That kept me connected to my family, like a games night and all this stuff, you know. And slowly, you know, I'd play a lot more video games. I did a lot of lazy stuff, but I'd still go see people. I kept my job. My job went through a couple stressful times where the company I was working for got acquired. They moved me around. And again, I remember it was here, actually. I'm in the place where it happened. I was like 4 weeks into my coming off of the benzodiazepines, which I know it was a small dose by the time I started reducing. But for me, it was a big obstacle, you know, and I took my damn time. It took me 8 months. And by the end, I remember I was thinking the end would be profoundly challenging. But the thing that was helpful about the end was that the amounts that I was taking were so absurdly small that I was like, if my sleep is starting to improve and I'm starting to feel better, it's probably not going to be harmed by me getting off of this speck of clonazepam that if I breathe it in through my nose, I wouldn't notice. You know, it was so tiny. But probably the hardest part was like 4 months in, halfway point. When
what made that the hardest part?
It was a combination of like knowing that I don't know, something in my mind was like, this is going from a meaningful dose to a non-meaningful dose, and so if something bad's gonna happen. And also like every time I reduced the dose, it was on like 2-weekish, 3-weekish schedules. The first one, nothing happened, but after that, something happened every time. And I don't know if it was like what combination of it was my body responding and what combination was actual withdrawal. But I experienced like a bazillion things during this withdrawal. Like I won't enumerate everything, but this is when the nervous system practices really started to help, because I go through days where I was in like churning, like my brain was going nuts, my body was going insane. I'd feel like just agitation, and I would stop. The practice that I specifically found helpful was I would stop. I would get to the floor, lie on something hard, do an orienting thing where you're kind of like looking around, seeing slowly what's around you, and you're not feeling comfortable at this point. It's still really uncomfortable. And then I'd close my eyes after I'd done this for a while, and I'd ask myself, is there some kind of like stress response that my body wants to complete? I don't know what it was about that wording when I found it that was so effective, but I
Mhm.
get like this feeling of just like some part of me losing it, like just freaking out in a good way, like letting it out.
Yeah.
Whether it was like I need to run or I need to like beat something up or whatever, it would play that out and then
Mhm.
it would calm down. So I don't think it would have been possible or as easy for me to get through that active coming off of the benzodiazepines if I hadn't had this practice. Because there were times where it was like at 11 and I would go do this expecting nothing to happen. And it would come down by like 7 notches.
Wow.
And it's rare for me where I don't believe when I do things anymore that they have immediate impact, but this was something that more
Mhm.
or less continues to have immediate impact. I'm not fussed if it goes away. Like it's
Yeah.
not a thing that I need to work, but it really helps me. And I
Mm.
never would have found it if I hadn't gone through this exercise of saying like the source of this knowledge, I have a really challenging time with. I don't like it,
Mhm.
but I'll give it a shot. And
Yeah. And
yeah,
maybe we can explain a little bit for the listeners who actually don't know what we're talking about when we say lay on the floor orienting, kind
yeah,
of what we're talking about. So, some of the work that we did together, and I know you've done quite a bit more work outside of our work, but was kind of this practice of getting into the body in a way that helps our brain know where we are in time and space, helps our brain know that it's safe and stable and grounded. And so there are some different kind of exercises that are sort of referred to as orienting exercises, but some of the main idea is just this concept that a lot of the times when we're in high stress states, high levels of hyperarousal, anxiety, things like this, the part of our brain that is um, you know, normally working to identify where we are in time and space can have trouble doing that. And that's not a process we're conscious of course, but when our brain is having a little bit of trouble with that, we can actually feel even more anxious or hyperaroused as a result. And so, orienting practices are just ways to help our brain either orient to the body, in other words, come into the body, or orient to our surroundings. So orient to the room that we're in, things like that. And it just is quite literally ways for the brain to help identify, okay, I'm here. I'm not in the past experiencing that horrible night I had, right? I'm here, not there. I'm in the body. I'm safe, or I'm in this room right now. And it sounds really simplistic. I remember when I first heard about this, like this kind of stuff, I thought, well, that's overly simple, but it can be really powerful stuff. And so one way to do this, as Mike mentioned, was you mentioned kind of laying on the floor, right? And the reason why that can be an orienting practice is the moment you're on a firm surface like that, your brain can really sense where your body ends and the floor begins. So you can feel those contact points along the body, and it helps that identification happen or that connection happen. So that was just one example. I just wanted to kind of share for everybody
mhm,
listening kind of what we were talking about. And that can essentially signal safety. And I know, Mike, you've done so much work in the nervous system realm, kind of even beyond this and ongoing. So I think it's really great that this was one of the areas that was helpful as you went along this journey.
yeah. Thanks. And what's interesting is that you gave me an exercise when we first met that was an orienting exercise, and it didn't help me much at all at that time.
Yeah.
And I, it just again the one of these things that took a bit of practice. And I think for me it was also a mindset shift of, well, sorry, it wasn't a mindset shift. I think I was just in hell when it started, and like things were
Yeah.
only going to help so much.
Yeah.
But as time went on, the things that helped a bit more.
Makes sense.
So, yeah, I think the things that I had to shift is like previously when I did a lot of this work, like nervous system things, they'd have models for things like maybe
Yeah.
your body. They have explanations, And I've done a video like this before for a different group that helped me prior 3 or 4 years ago. And looking back at that video, I remember telling them that the reason why I really liked their methodology is they gave me a model that I could use, I could work through it.
Right.
And I don't think that's the right way to go about it. Like for me now, maybe I've
Mm.
gone too far the other way, but like I don't ask why about pretty much anything anymore. And I think why is sort of an arrogant question a lot of the time.
Mm.
We're quite small and we have no idea what's going on. most of the time.
Yeah.
And I think what I've had to kind of separate out is like, I feel for the folks doing this kind of work, because I think a lot of times they need to refer to science or whatever to help people feel comfortable with it. But like, they don't know why this stuff works. Come on. Like there's,
It's all at the beginning stages of things,
yeah,
right? Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And like, it doesn't take long to dig into them and realize like this stuff's not proven, but you going into it with a mindset of like debunking isn't helpful.
Yeah.
Right. They may not know why or how a particular thing helps a certain group of people. And you know, the model that they're offering may be falsifiable. And that's fine. I'm okay with that. I just want to try the thing and see if it helps me. Whereas before, this was not gonna fly. Like I needed to have, and I think what's behind that is some certainty that if I try it, it's gonna work.
Yeah.
And if you kind of are able to eventually practice saying, okay, this thing might not work, maybe it'll just help me. That to me was a huge shift. It may not work. Maybe it will just help me.
Yeah.
Um, that a lot of this tension leaves. I can't remember the last time I had something happen to me and I Googled it. It's not even that I'm like, no, don't do it. It's like, it doesn't even register anymore.
Well,
It's like,
because you've
if it
gone
kills
there
me,
so
it
many
kills me.
times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, maybe just to wrap up, like I think
Yeah.
this year, because we're getting near the end of it, well, it was a long one. I finished tapering off of the benzodiazepines in not too long ago. I guess it would have been August. So it took a
Mhm.
full 8 months. Um, and then after that, I mean, I feel like things are much better than they were even before this all started. I don't get panic attacks at night anymore. Generally speaking, I'm able to help regulate myself a lot better. I didn't realize how toxic my lifestyle was to myself. Even though on paper
Mm.
everything was fine, I was doing everything that was healthy, I was going to the gym. I was constantly under pressure that I was exerting on myself. And this is known with folks who go through, it's a repeated pattern, folks who experience difficult to diagnose illnesses a lot of times.
Yeah. The
They're
mind
people
body.
pleasers. Yeah.
Yeah. People pleasers. I like how you said that. That's a big one.
Yeah.
Big.
Well, and I'd gone through this whole barrage of like fixing myself kind of once before and it helped me. So I was like, well, what else could be left? But
Yeah.
what really helped me this time around is I connected with my family, and it turns out this is really common in my family. Nobody talks about it. Now they do. But there's something in the combination of our upbringing and our genetics that um, every single person on my mother's side of the family has this thing where they're like possessed, that they must be good. Like they must perform, and like they're really rigid about what that means. They put really high expectations on themselves. And what was funny is
Yeah.
that I just absorbed that and thought I was normal. Um,
Yeah.
but it was really helpful to talk to them and just understand there's folks younger than me in my family and folks older than me in my family that are living this all in their own ways. And some of them have really brutal insomnia.
Yeah.
So I've been trying what I can to help them. But and then I think the second thing, and this is maybe difficult to hear and difficult to talk about, and this is probably around the time where when I was really in it and I was listening to other people's videos, I probably would have hit pause at this point. So, if you're not open to hearing difficult things right now, I feel you hit pause and maybe fast forward.
This is our
But
trigger warning for the
well, I guess, yeah. It's not just that. It's like, I don't know about triggers, but I think it's more like,
Yeah.
when you're in it, you don't want more of it. But
Maybe.
in those times where I was just minute by minute living with this feeling that my life was utterly destroyed, that I would rather die than be where I was.
Yeah.
That lasted for a long time, and I think for me, this point where I'm at, where I'm feeling healthier, feeling better, feeling more at ease with my life, um, I think I would have gotten here regardless, but this made it go a lot faster.
Mm.
And because it was that violent, um, I don't know how to put this, and it's easy to say when you're in a bit of a better situation, but I kind of became friendly with the concept of death, and not just the concept, like just being with it, and
Mhm.
not just death, but like things being horrific,
Yeah.
and in a way that's like I can't, you know, and it happens, and I don't want it to happen, but I'm kind of friends with it now, and it comes up a lot in unexpected places, like yeah. So it comes up, and I end up feeling like I want to write about this right now to myself or something like that. So
Yeah.
it's really shaped me, and it's made a lot of things easier. And
Mm.
I actually find myself confused now when I'm with people I'm close with, and they're so wired to like this needs to be perfect, and I need to succeed at this, and I need to do these things to my house, and I like to me it's sick, right?
Yeah.
Not sick as in like you are a sick person. Sick as in like I hope you get healthier. You know, like this seems
Yeah.
crazy.
Mhm.
Um, but that's how I was, and
Makes sense.
this has kind of helped soften me a little bit, I think. But yeah, in terms of like outcomes, like I sleep fine now. There's the jerks still stick around, but they're just like hello, and uh, often it's when I'm falling asleep, I'll get a couple jerks. Doesn't stop me from falling asleep. And I had been really stressed about this job change because my hours are earlier. I start at 7. And at the
Mhm.
time, it was mornings were brutal. I used to be a morning person, but mornings were brutal.
Yeah.
And when the time came to make the change, you know, because I had a few months' notice, anyways, I was stressed about it. But I thought to myself, like, when I get there, it may be different than where I am now. And lo and behold, it was easy.
Yeah.
First day, I just got up and it was fine. And now it's actually I prefer this because I can do things like this. You know,
That's amazing. Can I
and
circle back for a second and ask you, when you brought up kind of feeling like you had made friends with the concept of morality, death, these sorts of topics that I think sometimes are under discussed within this kind of experience. Can I ask what helped you make friends with it a little bit more?
I don't know.
I know it's a hard question, and
Like I got to a certain point where I wasn't terrified anymore.
yeah.
And again, like it's possible that you know what I wonder, and it's actually like wondering. It's not fear. I've seen. Okay, let me keep on topic. Um, let's say I go to the doctor tomorrow, and I get a diagnosis for something that's fatal.
Mhm.
I don't know how I would react. Like I might get thrown right back into it, but I'm okay with that.
Mm.
Like that's the
Yeah.
difference. I think it's not
Yeah.
that I know that I'm invulnerable or anything like this. If somebody gives me
Mhm.
really bad news,
Of course.
I understand my reaction may be anywhere from okay to back
Yeah.
into hell, right? But
Yeah.
what I have seen is that even in situations that are pretty bad, um, they move around.
Yeah.
It doesn't go to 11 and stay at 11. Like it stayed at
Yeah.
11 for like 3 weeks,
Yeah.
but even then there were times,
Mhm.
where things would get lighter for an hour. So it's not great, but I've seen it now, and I've seen it in a situation where I wasn't resisting it 100%. And I think that was the difference. It took me a long time to detect
Mhm.
when I'm resisting things because
Yeah.
at least the way I was raised and the way I was taught in school and all this stuff is you're wired to conquer. You're wired to beat things.
Yes. Yeah.
And
To fight
which
back.
is stupid. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't fight the universe.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that helps, but that's
Yeah.
a lot of the things that get me feeling things on this topic and getting me to feel it and think about it are unexpected. And so a lot of times when I'm writing it out, like I was at a farmer's market or something on the weekend, and I was with a friend, and they're like, I have a friend here who's got an art exhibit. Let's go see it." And I went to see it. It was about death and grief, and I was like, "FML, like why?" So I was about to leave, and I've gotten used to saying like, "No, can't," But there was something, the music that was playing drew me in, and I
Mm.
went and I walked through it, and I asked if I could have some time alone, and
Mm.
I just sat for like I don't know how long, 10 minutes. And I didn't know what I was thinking, but I knew what I was feeling. And I came out after it was done. I have an online, I used to share a lot about mental health stuff online, and I used to
Mhm.
speak about it. I don't do it anymore. This is a rare thing. I'd asked my last name not get disclosed either. That's cool.
Yes,
But
no problem.
I write anonymously because it helps me say what I want to say, but I don't feel safe anymore. I
Mm.
think part of me being able to speak publicly about what I was going through was because in my mind, like in my body, what that told me is that I'd conquered it. I'd won. So it was okay for me to talk about it. But when I got thrown back into it, I was not okay to talk about it
Yeah.
anymore. And now I'm at the other side. I'm like, it doesn't do me any good to discuss these things in public
Mm.
with my identity attached. I don't think that's
Mm.
healthy. I don't want to do it anymore. And what I
Mm.
found is I still wanted to do it though. I just didn't want to do it with my identity attached. That was a surprise. So I do write. I have an anonymous journal. It's on the internet, and I can share it with people by email and stuff, and say like, hey, because
Yeah.
this, I don't know how many other people experience this, but folks know what I've gone through, and I get family members or friends coming to me and saying, hey, that
Yeah.
thing that happened, like what happened? And I want them to know, but I don't want to relive it every time.
Yeah.
So I've written it out once, and I'm like, no problem. You go read this,
Yeah.
and it's helped to have it in a public place. So all this to say, like, I came out of this art exhibit, and I ended up writing about it for like 30 minutes, and it's not coherent.
Mm.
So I
It's
don't.
like
All this to say, like, I don't know what I feel, and I don't know what made it happen, but it's
yeah.
something.
I was gonna ask, what did you feel when you were there and you took that moment to sit? What came up for you?
Uh, when I was a kid, I was in high school or something, or I was in band. I got beat up a lot, and
Mike, don't admit that
yeah,
publicly.
I was in band. I played the clarinet, and our
Oh, it just gets worse. No, I'm kidding. I
yeah,
played the clarinet too. It's okay.
no way,
Yeah, I did.
cool. We keep finding commonalities.
Yeah.
Our band leader or whatever, what do you call that? I don't know, but
Yeah.
he got us to play the soundtrack to Tommy, which uh, I hadn't listened to since. And so a couple of days ago, I was whistling the tune because I've been whistling it for 30 years. I was like, I want to go listen to the actual album, and that album is interestingly about trauma, but it is so ridiculous. It's like it is not really about anything serious, okay? And but there's a part in the overture that is like a couple lines. I actually don't remember what they are anymore, but I was singing them to myself on repeat.
Mhm.
And I walked into the exhibit, and it's quite dark, and there's this droning sound. And it felt to me like I had enough of a distance from the suffering I'd gone through
Mm.
that I could think about it in this space without it being like right in my face. But I also felt compelled to keep singing that song because
Interest
it's really, I don't know why, but to me, it's like a warm, fuzzy feeling. And then there's
Mhm.
this other darkness. And
Mm.
it feels weird to do this stuff. Like, I feel a little bit like maybe I could see how people would think it was crazy. But to me, like, it's helpful to sit there and bring all these things together in the present.
Yeah.
Um, because it doesn't make it feel like this horrific thing that happened in the past that'll come back and eat me someday. It's still here. Um, and
Yeah.
that's fine. It actually helps me. I don't like it. And,
Mm.
but I do like it. It's hard to explain.
Yeah, I get that. It's an element of deep again, dropping resistance to this stuff that we're uncomfortable with or we don't even like, but there's a greater piece to that so
Well, I
that we
mean, there
don't
was one fella who gave a video experience a while ago, and I don't remember who he was or what his name was. I think he was in Norway, and I think he maybe had 2 episodes. I don't remember, but
Mm.
he'd shared a lot about his experiences with OCD and things like this. And I remember listening to his experience
Yeah.
when I was in a better place. I don't remember why I was listening. It was in one of those periods where like I was okay, but I would have liked to have been more okay. So those were the best
Sure.
times to listen to those videos.
Yeah, this is the best
Um,
time.
and I remember thinking like, yeah, I feel this. Not yet as the same way he does, I think, but the way he was talking about it really, really hit me. So
Oh, that's incredible. Well, can I ask as we begin to wrap up, I'd love to know if you're thinking about, let's say, people that are watching this right now that are really in the midst of the struggle with all of this stuff. Is there anything that you'd like to share with them, whether it's something you found the most helpful or just any sort of message that you could leave them with, that maybe they haven't learned on their journey yet, but you have?
I don't know, Michelle. It's
But no
hard.
pressure.
Yeah,
Or maybe another way of thinking about it is if you could think back to yourself, maybe
yeah,
in the
that's
early
easier.
days, think back to yourself in the early days. Is there something that you would say to that version of yourself from now?
Yeah, I think I would try to tell them first. The thing I would tell them is like, you're not going to be able to listen to me right now, um, and so that's okay. But
Yeah.
I think what I would encourage them to do is understand that um, try to be sensitive to all the ways that I'm putting pressure on myself,
Mm.
because those things are fundamentally hurting me. And it sounds simple, but when I look back at all the different ways that I was putting pressure on myself at every stage, it was really harmful. And
Mm.
it's one of these things that sounds simple. It takes practice, and
Yes.
I think that would be another thing I would say is that these things you don't have to believe them. You just have to practice them, but not too much. You know,
Mhm.
just a
Yeah.
little bit at a time, and see what you can do. I think,
Amazing.
yeah. I don't know what else to do. Like, I think
Mm.
it's funny going through this because I feel like I'm rambling, but as I work through the story, it's interesting to me what things are really stick out clearly and how much I've forgotten.
Yeah.
It's
And I
hard for
think
me to pinpoint
that's
things in time.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's really common. And I'm just, so happy to know that you're, I think that you had mentioned you are sleeping. That's always sometimes
Yeah.
a question I forget to
I've
ask people, believe it or
been saying it
not.
before. Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. And I know that
For a couple of months after coming
mm,
off the benzos, it was not the same as before. I just figured like, um,
mm,
yeah, my sleep will probably be different for the rest of my life. That's fine.
yeah.
As long as I can, well, not that's it. That's fine. I'll figure it out. I'll find a way. Um, but yeah, on its own, kind of took a while, but it sorted itself out ish. I
Amazing.
say ish because like whatever.
Yeah,
I
I
feel like
get
I still haven't figured out the language to talk about these things, but I just don't have an expectation of it.
no, I completely understand. And I think that there's also a common thread that so many of us go through a bigger journey with all of this, a journey more around, also around sort of self-discovery with this as well. And so I think, you've kind of shared several points that kind of lend itself to that too, around not just it being around sleep. It's kind of bigger, broader within our lives.
Yeah, Alina said something. Coach Alina, I think that's her name.
Yeah.
She
Yeah.
said
That's
something that I thought really hit me hard, which was that when she first started going through her experience with insomnia, she started exploring really widely. And eventually she's like, this is too much crap. Like, I just can't. I'm just going to focus on sleep. And I think that's wise also, is to say, like, yeah, maybe there's going to be a bigger life journey out of this, but it's going to happen on its own. Like, I don't need to
yeah.
force it. And
Yeah.
yeah, I feel compelled to say this because I know in a lot of videos people ask, like, I don't know if this is coming and I'm stealing your thunder, but
Steal it. Go for
yeah,
it.
is there is there something you're grateful for or whatever? And
Mm.
is there something in this? Do you want to? Is that something we still do?
Mike, is there anything that you're grateful sometimes? I will ask if there is a
Yeah,
perceived, if there was a silver lining, something to be grateful for. And you know what? Sometimes the answer is no, not
yeah.
so much, and that's okay
I think you
too.
know what my answer is going to be because no, I'm not grateful for this. I think yeah, it's
It's
just
okay.
real. I appreciate what I got out of it because it's a lot, but
Yeah.
I
Careful,
don't.
that sounds a little bit like gratefulness.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a shift there, right, to get to grateful. Anyhow,
Yeah.
I've taken a lot of time, so thanks.
No, no, it's been great. And I know myself, I think back and there are definitely things that I feel grateful for because I feel like I'm different as a person and
Yeah.
yeah, who I am is completely different. Of course, my career has changed quite substantially as well, but there are definitely other parts of it that I don't particularly feel grateful for. So I also don't think it's an either or that we have to feel completely fully grateful or not at all. Sometimes there's almost existing on a bit of a spectrum. But with
Well,
that,
it's
I
just
want to,
notion. Yeah.
go ahead. Go ahead.
No. I feel like I keep interrupting you. You're trying to end things. So
No, go ahead. Please interrupt my ramble. Go ahead.
no, my last thing is I think I was really open to, you said, your career has completely changed and stuff. I think I was really open to my whole life changing. And what's interesting is I came to the end of it, and internally it's changed a ton. But looking from the outside in, my life hasn't changed at all. I got the same job, same family, same friends. I live in the same place. I do the same things for fun.
Yeah.
I just do everything very differently, but I don't think anybody notices. And
But you feel differently inside.
completely different, yeah.
Yeah.
But it didn't require me like taking a detonator to my whole life. I just had to live it differently.
Do you feel like a greater sense of peace inside?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Amazing. I understand that completely. All right. I think that's the perfect place to end
Yes.
off. So
Thank you, Michelle.
with that, I really want to thank you so much for coming today, for sharing your story. It's going to help so many others, especially people who are going to relate to so many different parts of things that you shared today. So just thank you. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks, Michelle. It's always good to see you, and I appreciate it.
You too. All right, everyone. We'll see you next time.